Magam from Eskom's generation, who will be supporting the Minister during this session. We also have Ms. Daphne Mokoena, Eskom spokesperson. As per usual, the Minister will kick off the session with his presentation. Thereafter, we will open the floor to questions. Without taking up much time, I'd now like to invite the Minister to the podium to commence with the briefing.
Thank you very much, Tsakani, and good morning to everyone. And once more, just to thank the members of the media, the Fourth Estate, for the tremendous work that you are doing, allowing us an opportunity to engage with the public through your medium, to ensure that we do give everyone an appreciation of the performance of the grid, and also the update on our execution and the prosecution of the Energy Action Plan, which was introduced or unveiled by President Ramaphosa in July of 2022. So we really do appreciate this opportunity. Today I'm going to do a bit more focus on the work that the team has been doing, and also just an indication on how we're dealing with some of the reports that have been commissioned in this space of electricity from government side and also from Eskom. I think the latest one that was a VGBE report, which was commissioned by National Treasury. So I think it's important to say the following in relation to that report. The first one is just to have an appreciation of why the report. So the report was commissioned by National Treasury in February rather of 2023, and the intention of the report really was to give National Treasury a greater level of appreciation of some of the operational issues that are obtaining at the level of Eskom, so that there could be, if you like, some degree of measure of the performance of Eskom against what the report would have put forward as the recommendation. And really, it also comes about as a result of the fact that the National Treasury, as everyone will know, has provided significant fiscal injection to Eskom. So I think Treasury wanted to have a basis of interrogating, if you like, the deployment of that capital relative to what the report would have generated. So I think that's what the report was really seeking to do. I think it's important that I also state that there has been a number of reports that were commissioned earlier than the VGBE report, preceding this report. More significantly, the report that was commissioned by Department of Public Enterprises in 2019, what was referred to as the Ministerial Technical Review Team, just to try and understand, if you like, the operational performance and some of the issues that are obtaining at Eskom. There was subsequently a report that was generated by the World Bank in 2022, and then there was also a report generated by commissioned rather by the Eskom board, just to give an independent review in relation to the performance of the grid WSP report. And then in addition to this, on the advent of the Ministry of Electricity, as everyone will remember, I had gone to visit the power stations, all the power stations, engaged with the management team, engaged with the organized labor, engaged with labor itself, just the broad spectrum of the workers at Eskom. And then I generated what I call the diagnostic report, which report was then presented before Cabinet for consideration. So I think it's important that when we look at the VGBE report, it's not necessarily in isolation. Essentially is, if you like, a combination, a tapestry, part of the tapestry of the work that has been done in this area, trying to, from one angle or the other, trying to understand the operational performance at Eskom. I think that just three major themes that are cutting across all of these reports that I've mentioned: the Ministerial Technical task team review team, the World Bank report, the WSP report, the VGBE report, and the work that I've done, the report on the diagnostic generated by the minister in the presidency responsible for electricity. So three broad themes. The first one is issues around the processes. Essentially, this talks to issues around the management of infrastructure. And then the second theme is around the operating systems and plant. And then the third theme has to do with people, mindset, behavior, capabilities, the issues of morale, you can mention them. So those are the three broad themes that are coming out of this exercise. So I think it's important that there's an appreciation that, of course, there is some work that is being done on how best to respond to these issues. But I think the major event that has happened since the commissioning of those reports is that there's greater levels of stability at Eskom. Now we have a more permanent appointment at the apex level in the form of the CEO, Mr. Dan Marukani, and of course the leadership of the board under Dr. Mteto, essentially trying to ensure that there's a consolidation first of these reports, their findings and recommendations, and they are working on the more structured way of how best to respond to some of those issues. Having said that, I must emphasize that already there's work that is being done in relation to responding to some of those issues. So we're looking forward to that consolidation and a more structured approach on how we're responding to these issues. Like I said, every time when I come here, I do the update on the Energy Action Plan. I'll be touching on some of those issues, plant and system, the operating systems, and also the plan. I mean, another typical example of the progress that have been made going forward. If you look at the VGB report, just to isolate it, it makes a point of an incentive scheme just to get the morale going. Mr. Ngumalo, the new head of generation, has already introduced that. If you look at the VGB, it talks to the issues of attention to the reduction of the partial load losses. I've made the point that Mr. Ngumalo and the team are already working on that. Isolated Matimba, Kendal, amongst other power stations that requires attention. The VGB report does make the point that there's been, as they refer to it in inverted commas, a fixation on EAF, and therefore undermining, if you like, issues around philosophy maintenance we have made, and then delaying maintenance of some of this, the fleet of Eskom, which can result in dire consequences going into the future. One of the issues that we have been making, the point I've been making consistently in the leadership of Eskom under the board stewardship of Dr. Mteto and also Mr. Ngumalo, was the fact that there's greater investment on maintenance. So the 252 billion fiscal relief focused on the maintenance, and that's why when you went into the period of December of last year, January of this, 18% of our generating capacity was out on planned maintenance. So essentially not taking expedient measures, not taking shortcuts, and that's what the team has been doing. And we continue to do that even to this stage, to ensure that there's greater investments in maintenance. So I thought that it's important that there is that appreciation. And of course the leadership under Mr. Dan Marukani will be able to ensure that there's a more cogent and coherent response, not just to the VGBE, but also to WSP, the World Bank, and the Ministerial Technical Review team. Some of those recommendations, like I said, the team has been working on that, so we'll provide a more consolidated picture of what we're doing. So we're using that as a canvas against which we're able to mount these responses. But I guess that from time to time, when we take the opportunity to share with you the work that we've been doing in relation to the Energy Action Plan, is in part a response to that. And then the other feature of an illustration of the response to this, the genesis of the Energy Action Plan, those 5 outcomes, some of those outcomes, how they've been configured, is a function of what some of these reports would have been saying. Of course, the ones that came before the introduction of the Energy Action Plan, they would have been a significant basis against which we are able to formulate what constitute the energy action plan. So what's the point I'm making is that all of these things should be seen in their totality, and that's the work that we'll be doing. We have, of course, in the course of doing this, in the interim, the leadership of Eskom has identified, if you like, 10 focus areas. Remember I said the transversal themes are 3, but then those then gets to be elaborated in the focus areas. How best do you respond to these transversal areas? And this focus areas predates the VGBE report, and you will see that some of them essentially addresses what comes out of the VGBE report. Those 10 focus areas, the first one is around the plant condition, something that is being elevated in the VGBE report and something that has been receiving attention. The issues of inadequate capacity, essentially responding to issues around, if you like, part of it responding to the people's issues, including a third area around skills and experience. Just an appreciation that, especially when it comes to a new build program, and also the fact that over a period of time, there's been significant hemorrhaging of the skills because of both the subjective and objective challenges that have been facing Eskom. We have found that there's a number of people with considerable degree of experience that have left. So it's important that you are able to continue to build the pipeline of experience. So it's one of the areas that they've been receiving attention, the third area. And then the other one is the new build defects. So I think it's a matter of public record that there's a number of defects that accompanied, if you like, the commissioning of both Kusile and Medupi, and those are receiving attention. So those are some of the areas that were receiving attention. And then the Eskom Roadtech Industries, essentially, if you like, an arm of Eskom, an implementing arm of Eskom from a technical point of view. I think they need to capacitate it so that there's no over-reliance on external parties. And that's one of the issues that comes out of the VGB report, over-reliance on external parties without necessarily building internal capacity. So one of the focus areas is really about strengthening that Roadtech. And of course, we know that Mr. Nxumalo comes out of that area arena, and we have, I think, the leadership of Roadtech now confirmed the stability there, and they also continue to build their own capacity. And then there's issues of fraud and corruption, the point that we've been making consistently, the need for us to ensure that we are able to address issues of leakage because they undermine the degree and ability of Eskom to respond to these challenges. It's a focus area of attention. And then there are issues around coal. Of course, on record, when we came on stream, the issues around coal quality, how you manage the coal assets, now that you've got Kusile, the degree to which you're going to get to a stage where you are going to run the 6 units, whether you are able to confirm the availability of that supply. So there's a coal management plan that Eskom has put in place. So that's another focus areas. And then there are issues that are related to policies and procedures. And this talks to the rate at which Eskom can procure, especially given the environment that Eskom is facing. And if you look at the VGB report, it does elevate the issues around the procurement dispensation, just creating a bespoke dispensation to allow Eskom to be able to have an accelerated path in relation to procurement. So those are procedures, internal procedures, and some of them are governed by a prevailing legislation. And the point I've made previously was that there is that engagement between Eskom, National Treasury, to see to what degree there could be some level of leverage given to Eskom to go into the procurement space without undermining the issues of transparency, competitiveness, and the like, but essentially allowing the speed with which that procurement can happen, given, if you like, the state of emergency that is confronting us on the energy side. And then the ninth issue is around the funding, and this has received considerable attention. I think the fiscal relief being provided by National Treasury has gone a long way, has enabled if you like, the ramping up of planned maintenance. I think there's a relationship between the amount of maintenance we can do and the available funding. And we know that there's been a significant erosion of the Eskom balance sheet. Of course, they're on track to address that situation. But I think that fiscal relief from National Treasury has provided, if you like, significant breathing space, and Eskom is able to do the amount of planned maintenance that we are seeing now. And of course, the results will be seen when these units return to service. The VGB report does make the point that there's investment in planned maintenance not being expedient, not being fixated, as they put it in inverted commas, with EAF, but doing what is right to these plans. And that's what the team has been doing, and that funding dispensation has helped. And then the last one of the 10 is around the environmental compliance. So essentially, if you look at prevailing legislation, a lot of this Eskom power station will be found wanting in relation to environmental compliance. I think becoming more stringent, of course, to safeguard and protect the livelihoods of, and the lives rather, and health of people within the immediate proximity of this power station, but also to protect proximity, reduce emissions. And we know science has proven, if you like, the rate at which we emit and climate change, and we know what the devastating impact of climate change on the lived experiences of our people. We don't need to look further than what's happening in KZN and some of the drought that we've experienced in the Western Cape provinces. The floods also again in the Northwest and KZN are just a living testimony of what this is, the devastation that is caused by climate change. So it's important that in the course of this we are able to focus on issues of environmental compliance, and I underline compliance because we have no other option but to comply with those legislative prescripts. So the point I'm making is that having identified those 3 transversal areas, and then there's these 10 focus areas. Of course, the leadership under Dr. Teto and the CEO, Mr. Marokane, and the team will then further refine that. So I'm confident that they'll come out in the public just to say this is how we are responding to some of these pertinent questions. So I thought that it's important that we are able to share with you that first we welcome the VGPE report. I think Eskom and ourselves can benefit immensely from, if you like, the perspective of other experts, providing an independent view, providing a different lens of analysis of the nature of the problem, and providing their own recommendations on what is possible going into the future. So I think that's a welcomed approach, and that's our attitude on how we are engaging with the VGP report to ensure that they were able to be a bit more comprehensive in this response. So it can only add to the arsenal from further understanding the nature of the problem, but also from what other experts are saying on how best to resolve this. So we welcome the report and very grateful to National Treasury for having commissioned this study. Of course, it predates the existence of the ministry, but I think it's an important intervention because it helps us as the Ministry of Electricity and Eskom to have a better understanding, appreciation coming from other players on what is possible going in the future. Let me emphasize again is that some of these things, a lot of the issues that have been raised are issues that have been receiving attention, some of which I've been reporting to every time when I get this opportunity to share with the general public on the way that we are addressing this problem. Just on the way forward, like I said, from an Eskom side, there will be that consolidation of all other historic reports and ensuring that they are able to map in the most comprehensive fashion how we respond to some of those. Responding to the recommendations, I mean what type of action will be taken in addressing those issues that have been identified in those reports. So that's how we really want to take the process forward. And of course, the Ministry of Electricity takes ownership at the government level from the generation side, transmission side, on how we'll be responding to these issues going into the future. And of course, some of them will be infused in the work that NICOM is doing and the generation recovery plan that Eskom has been working on, updating, multiple iteration, taking account of, if you like, the fluid nature of the space, what has been some of the developments. So the recovery plan does do exactly that. So I thought that it's important that we dedicate some degree of time just to illustrate or give an indication on how we'll deal with some of those recommendations without necessarily tabulating what those recommendations are, just to say they receiving attention, and we welcome that intervention. And then on the actual performance of the grid, of the generation capacity, so we can see, like I always do, we use May as a baseline, if you like, so that we are able to have an appreciation of what constitutes the trend. I make the point that it is important that in the midst of momentary setbacks, where you go to stage 4 and then occasionally you go to stage 6, we don't lose sight of essentially what is the trend line. What is the overall performance of the grid over a period of time? And that's what our focus is, transfixed on the resolution of that problem, if you like, the trend line. And then also accepting that the strategy that the Eskom has taken, and as VGBE makes the point that you should not necessarily be fixated just only on EAF, just do the right things. And that's why there've been that ramping up of planned maintenance. So I think there are two key points I want to make in relation to this trend line. And I think that the best measure of this trend line is illustrated in that unplanned capacity loss factor, which is a combination of the reliability of the unit and the partial load losses. Again, the reliability of the units, using the metaphor of the car, it means that the car just stops on its own. It just stalls, just doesn't want to proceed. Partial load losses, the car is driving, but not at its optimal capacity, and therefore you are losing some degree of performance. When you put all of that together, in these parlance, I refer to them as the unplanned capacity loss factor. So what you want to do is that you want to reduce this considerably. So we know that when we entered May, these partial load losses, the amount of megawatts that were lost as a result of the partial load losses and the unreliability of these units was averaging 17,369. And you can see the trend line has been going down, and the best performance really we have seen it during the month of October, and the very best we have seen it during the month of December, where we had about 13,473. So compared to the baseline of May, essentially we retrieved about 4,000 additional megawatts. For the month of February, we have been able to claw back again, on average, about 3,000 megawatts. So I think it's important, that's a measure of where we are. And then the next question I think the general public will ask is, if Ramokgopa are making the claim that that's that 3,000 that we have clawed back, why is it that you continue to have some degree of load shedding? Again, to the point I've made, we use that improvement in the unplanned capacity loss factor as we're taking out units out on planned maintenance. So essentially, we're negating what has been the fruits on the side of the unplanned capacity loss factor. We're using that opportunity for us to ramp up planned maintenance. And you can see, when we're in baseline of May, that planned maintenance, the amount of megawatts we have taken out of our own planning, our own volition, was 3,100. Now, as I speak to you in February, we're averaging 7,300. So essentially, there's an additional 4,000 that we have taken out of, although this side we have recovered on average 3,000 megawatts, we have used that opportunity of that recovery to take out more units so that we're able to fix them. As this unit returns, you'll be able to see a completely different picture of the attenuation of the intensity of load shedding and also the frequency of load shedding. As I make the point all the time, this is one ministry, and the performance of Eskom is easy for everyone to measure. You simply do an analysis, the amount of hours my lights are on or off compared to the same period the previous year. And you will see without any shadow of doubt that there's been a significant improvement. But the point is not just to reduce load shedding. The point is to ultimately get rid of load shedding. So that's it's important that there's that appreciation of the trend line. So you can see that if we had not ramped up that planned maintenance, so we kept planned maintenance, reduced it from the current levels. If we had reduced planned maintenance by anything between 25 to 50%, would have completely eradicated load shedding, at least during those periods. And of course, the natural question that will come, why is it that you didn't reduce it? For exactly the same reasons I've shared with you. It's important that we play that long-term game rather. So we can take expedient measures, celebrate that there's no load shedding. We are not doing what we ought to do on planned maintenance. The outside experts have told us, the WSP report, the World Bank report, the Ministerial Technical Task Team Review Committee, the VGB report, the latest, they have said to us, focus on planned maintenance. And it is for this reason that Eskom has gone to National Treasury and say, we need additional fiscal relief as a result of the deterioration of the balance sheet of Eskom. Eskom has deployed significant amount of that money on planned maintenance. The units will return, they will return healthier, they'll be able to perform. We could go on the short-term intervention expedient, reduce this planned maintenance by up to 50%. We're at stage 2 now. We can take it from the current 6,700 or so, take it back to the levels of May to 3,000, then you'll not have load shedding. But we guarantee you that there will be deterioration of these assets, and then in 3 months' time, there will be total collapse, significant failures, and we are going to find it very difficult to recover these units. And therefore, it's important that we are precise, methodical, intentional, and it must be orchestrated. And that's the point that we are making to ensure that we are able to address this situation going forward. So I really want to say that we're confident about the prospects going into the future, and those prospects is about reducing the intensity of load shedding, addressing, if you like, the regularity of load shedding, in keeping with that mandate given by the President, as we work on long-term interventions. Those long-term interventions have to talk to the acceleration of the bid windows, the issues on the transmission side. I did say to you, we'll come back to you on transmission. We're engaging tomorrow with the transmission company of South Africa, the board. I think it's important because that is their domain. Really, the ownership of that intervention sits with them. So it's important that they are the ones who take ownership of that. But what we want from our side is speed, is agility, is aggressiveness, our ability to leverage on private sector resources without relinquishing ownership of the transmission. And once we agree on those, the NTCSA will be able to make that determination. As I sit down, just expecting, inviting the questions, just to say that it will be remiss of me not to just pay tribute to Mr. Caleb, the erstwhile acting CEO of Eskom. I mean, he held the fort. Someone who raised his hand, the CFO, that's a substantive position, very, very difficult responsibility in the midst of a major crisis, which crisis has not left us yet. But Caleb raised his hand and took up the responsibility. I want to say to Caleb, on behalf of the South African population, we are really grateful for your sacrifices, for standing up and ensuring that you work with us to get to where we are. Exceptionally grateful. We are thankful of the contribution you have made. And to Mr. Dan Marokane, the new CEO, we wish him well. We're working with him already, hit the ground running, someone who came out of the ranks of Eskom. The learning curve is not that steep. He already knows the personalities, how it works, someone sound technical knowledge. We're looking forward to the stewardship of Dan and of course working with Dr. Mteto. But to Caleb, thank you very much, my brother, for the contribution that you have made. Of course, for an average person, you would have wanted load shedding to go. We're working on that. But believe you me, I mean, this task is a daunting task, and Caleb was able to raise his hand. Someone who comes from, an area of finances, raised his hand and was able to lead us during the difficult period. It still is difficult. He carried us through winter. You have seen the performance through winter. So thank you very much, Caleb, for that contribution. Thanks, TK.
Thank you very much, Minister. The Minister's presentation will be shared with all of you and we'll also upload it on the Presidency website. We now open the floor to questions. And in keeping to our established protocol, please introduce yourself and the media house that you represent.
Good morning, Antoinette Slavic from Maputo. Minister, the VGBE report specifically recommended that one or two experts be appointed, external experts at every power station. The report was already finalized mid-2023. Has that been done? And if not, is Eskom open to it? And is National Treasury insisting on it as part of the conditions for the bailout or fiscal support? If you can help us with that, thanks.
Thank you.
Minister Kgosientsho from SABC News. I'm also referring to the VGBE report. In its executive summary, it also notes of the extensive interference into the affairs of Eskom and how that has led to the deterioration with regards to hierarchy and also organizational structure. What is the plan from your department to ensure that now that Mr. Marokane is there, we have seen a revolving door of CEOs going out? How do we know that Mr. Marokane is going to be staying there and will be there for the benefit of South Africans and not necessarily of just government? And secondly, could you just give us an idea, you probably did touch on this, the planned maintenance. What is the plan on an annual basis in 2024? I see you do that scenario talking about if plane maintenance was reduced from 23 September to this year, how it would have averted load shedding. But to which end are we going to see planned maintenance happening? When are we going to know that the power stations are now ready to go on without constantly needing to be maintained? Thank you very much.
There's a hand this side.
Minister Kgosientsho from Kaya 959. In the city of Johannesburg last week, people were without water for most of the week. And as explained to us, this was due to one of the city power stations being struck by lightning, therefore affecting the Aikenhof pump stations. Minister, in terms of power stations being prepared to handle naturally occurring disasters or even managing the turnaround time in effecting solutions, what strategies are being considered in this light?
There's a hand.
Thank you. It's Janine Erasmus from Business Day. Minister, some more questions on the VGBE report. If you can please comment specifically on the report warns of catastrophic failure at stations like Matupi, Matimba and Kendal due to the poor condition of water treatment plants. Is this something that Eskom was aware of prior to the report, and is anything being done to do maintenance on these water treatment plants to prevent this catastrophic failure that can take 13,000 megawatts offline if something was to go wrong?
Thank you. Are those all the questions in the room? We'll proceed to Itumeleng, who will take us through the questions shared online.
Thank you. The first question is from Helmo Cruz, Independent Media. Why did non-Eskom generation register the third consecutive year-over-year decline in January? When will Medupi Unit 4 come back online? What is the anticipated electricity demand growth for 2024? How many rand are left in the budget for open cycle gas, turbines, diesel? And the second question is from Paul Bloomberg. How important is completing the grid expansion that you've mentioned will need 390 billion rand? How soon can Eskom get an exemption from Treasury to access development finance funding for the grid? How quickly do you estimate private investment can be assessed? The third question is from Terence Creamer, Engineering News. Last week's meeting between Cabinet members and business indicated that action should be taken to ensure that there is a grid available for the full wind allocation in bid window 7. Does this imply that the curtailment addendum to the grid connection capacity assessment is immediately applicable to the bid window? If so, how will this be managed and communicated as the addendum was published after the launch of the bid window? And the second question is, what is on the agenda of the ministers' meeting with the NTCSA board tomorrow?
Thank you. Upon the responses, we'll take the last round after these responses. We'll start with Eric. He'll be followed by the minister.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Just to give context to the planned maintenance, and I think as we've communicated, this morning when one looks at planned maintenance, we are at 5,200, and it's in keeping with our plans. As we go into our winter plan, as we've done last year, and traditionally as we do in winter, generally planned maintenance hovers around between 3,000 and 3,500. And you know that it typically is an advantage because we see you know that's as an opportunity where when you look at the summer profile, that's where we actually do most of our maintenance. Just going back to what happened over December this year and January, we did much more maintenance. It was intentional based on also the funding that we've got. And if you really look at what maintenance in the second week of January, we peaked at 18% maintenance, which took away about 4% from the EAF, right? So in terms of the summer profile, generally the summer profile for planned maintenance is around 6,000. What we do is when the public schools close and when the actual industry then go on shutdown, we use the opportunity from the December holidays to actually do some opportunity maintenance, and that obviously with the demand profile, we do a bit more maintenance. So the general trend is in winter, we hover around between 3,000 and 3,500, and in summer, between 6,000 and 6,500 for planned maintenance. The other questions that I will respond to then in terms of, Janine, in terms of the water treatment plant, so we are busy digesting. We've already started. We've had various engagements with both National Treasury and with the VGB. The report is being embraced. However, there are some inaccuracies in the report which we have formally responded, and we'll continue to work with the National Treasury team. In terms of the water treatment plant, for Medupi and Kusile, there is no sharing of water treatment plants, right? I need to clarify that. They have their own water treatment plants. These are big plants. However, in terms of the water treatment plants, we have identified and communicated this. When you look at the Kendall detailed recovery plan, challenges do lie with the water treatment plant, and we are actually putting in plans to address that. There's been a lot of focus at Kendall in terms of resolving the moles and the actual the ashing plant. So I just wanted to give that clarity. Then in terms of questions raised by Helmut, Medupi 4 is actually planned for September. I think we've been sharing via media that the unit now is parked outside Medupi and plans underway to actually start with the installation. In terms of the OCGT budget, we are still within the budget. We'll focus on the Eskom allocation. Minister, I think those are the questions I've captured on my side.
Non-Eskom
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eric, and thanks, colleagues, for those questions. No, Janine, you do make the point that one of the recommendations coming out of the VGB report is to have experts embedded in some of the power stations. That's a determination to be made by the management of Eskom. Like I've said previously, I don't have any intention of overstepping the mark. Is a management decision that Eskom and the board will make. But let me also indicate that in the context of the NECOM, we have identified 6 power stations where we will need to work with external experts, and already private sector has put forward those experts, and it's for Eskom, the leadership of Eskom, to make that determination on whether they agree to deploy those experts. Of course, they'll make their own consideration, but just the long and short, Antoinette, is for Eskom to make that determination. But I think there's an appreciation, of course, from the perspective of NECOM, that we might need additional experts. Just to Diabo, we have no intention. I mean, the issues of interference, I mean, exactly to the point, as I was answering Antoinette, I will not enter into the management space. I will not enter into a space of Eskom board where they have to exercise fiduciary responsibilities, because their primary, if you like, objective is to protect the interest of Eskom. But we have found that through a platform that we have created with the chair of the Eskom board, and also the CEO, the erstwhile CEO, the former acting CEO, Mr. Caleb Kasim, and now it's continuing with Mr. Marokani. When we sit around the table, understanding what is the common objective, who plays what role to resolve which problem, we find that that engagement is seamless. And we hope that having created that degree of ambience, I think it will continue to give more reason for Mr. Marokani and the entire management team and the rest of the Eskom people to remain and help us to resolve this challenge going into the future. Of course, you know that Mr. Marokani did not leave Eskom at his own will. Accord is someone who has always committed to contributing towards the resolution of this crisis, before we even had this crisis, to being this more acute, just to ensure that we attain energy sovereignty. And he knew when he applied essentially what some of the variables that you'll find in this space. So I'm more than confident that Mr. Marokani will hold the fort for the entire, if you like, period of the contract. I'm more than confident that that will happen. And just to Katleho, so on about 2 weeks ago, I had an engagement with all the mayors of Limpopo, and really the big issue that they were raising was the issues of first the energization of the water infrastructure. So it's around it's dams, it's wastewater treatment works, it's water treatment plants. And one of the issues they've raised that in areas where they are already energized, there are challenges with regards to interruptions as a result of load shedding. And if, of course, the intensity of load shedding is acute, like you are beyond stage 4, you're at stage 6, what happens is that there's delay in the replenishing of the reservoirs. And of course, that leads to shortage of water, and the recovery period is over an extended period. So one of the engagement we're having now with Minister Mkhunu, putting together a team, is to see how best we can support this kind of infrastructure. Of course, I'm not responding to the Aikenhof power station. I'm sure Joburg Water and City Power are more competent to respond to that. I'm just giving you, if you like, a more broader picture of how we want to respond to the challenges in relation to water infrastructure, to the extent to which they are adversely affected by more acute levels of load shedding. So that's the work that we're doing with Minister Mkhunu. We're first identifying those major strategic installations. Of what I mean by that, in loose terms, the ones that we can ill afford to see them fail as a result of load shedding. So there's a need for some degree of categorization, and also those that will take us time to replenish, and therefore they have to be protected from incidents of load shedding. So that's the conversation that the technical teams are working on to address this situation. To Paul, yes, grid capacity is important, and of course that's part of the conversation, just to the question raised earlier on the conversation with the National Transmission Company of South Africa. Like I said, that is their domain really. They are the ones who take ownership of this. So what we're trying to do in that meeting is to ensure that there's a degree of alignment. They are the ones who take leadership on this issue, because they've been appointed to do exactly that. I think combination of men and women with exceptional qualities, essentially they are best resourced to help us to respond to this challenge. There's work that the ministry has done. We'll deposit it into the basket of their consideration, the totality of the options that are necessary to resolve the issues of transmission. Remember, like I said, the deterioration of the Eskom balance sheet, the size of the investment ticket is such that even if you had a healthy balance sheet, you still needed to buttress that with external financing. We know, for an example, that there's an insatiable appetite by private sector to invest in transmission expansion. So really it's just to focus on how best you design that bespoke intervention, on how best to accelerate the rollout of this transmission, its modernization, to enable the onboarding of new grid, new generation capacity, especially our renewables in the Cape provinces, Northern Cape, Eastern Cape, and Western Cape. I think there's a symbiotic relationship between the two. You have to roll this infrastructure transmission before you can get the benefit of this additional grid capacity. So we're working on how best to access that. So the ministry has already fashioned what is possible, having learned from peer countries, those who have done it before us, but also experts from various institutions globally recognized, have made contribution on what are the, if you like, the flow of options that are available to us. We have narrowed them down to meet the South African conditions, and of course that's what we're sharing with NTCSA, essentially the work that we've been doing, and then the NTCSA then champions that work going forward, so that it was not in vain, that work. So I think at the conceptual level there will be, I'm confident there will be symmetry in relation to the need for us to access that private financing, but it's how you do it, the pace, speed, and how you are able to work out the terms of accessing that. Yeah, I'll leave it that.
Thank you, Minister and Eric. We'll take the last round of questions for any follow-ups. We'll start with Antoinette.
Minister, the curtailment that will open up some more capacity on certain parts of the grid, surely somebody has to pay for that. What effect will that have on the electricity tariffs that consumers will pay?
Thanks. Kgosientsho Ramokgopa again from Business Day. So just to follow up on the response to my question, what were some of the other inaccuracies in the VGBE report that Eskom has reported to Treasury and VGBE? And I just want to understand, so you're saying, Dupi Matana does not share a water treatment plant. Is there an issue with either of the plants at all?
Thank you. Any more questions in the room? Okay, Itumeleng, please take us through the online questions.
There's two questions that are remaining in the online.
Kgosientsho from EE Business Intelligence is asking, the VGBE report raises concern about water supply to Medupi Power Station for the intended flue gas desulfurization plant required in terms of a World Bank loan to Eskom. What is being done to provide the necessary water supply to Medupi Power Station? And what is the status of the request for proposals for flue gas desulfurization plant for Medupi Power Station? Terence Klima, there's a question he asked earlier and it was not answered according to him. The question is, last week's meeting between cabinet members and business indicated that action should be taken to ensure that there is grid available for the full wind allocation in bid window 7. Does this imply that the curtailment addendum to the grid connection capacity assessment is immediately applicable to the bid window? If so, how will this be managed and communicated as the addendum was published after the launch of the bid window? Last question is from Naila Ibrahim from News 24 Business. Can the Minister please explain what the winter outlook is for load shedding stages? Her second question is, how many hours of load shedding has the country had this year? And how does it compare to the same stage last year? Third question from Naila. One of the recommendations from the VGBE report was to step up maintenance and potentially take some power plants offline for extended periods, which may result in higher stages of load shedding. Has government considered this option going forward? The additional question and the last from Naila again. Could Eric please elaborate on the inaccuracies contained in the VGBE report? Thank you, that's all.
Thank you for the questions. We'll start with Eric, who will be followed by the Minister.
Thank you very much for those questions. I think in terms of the curtailment, I will have to get formal details from my transmission colleagues. They manage that whole portfolio in terms of the pricing. We do know that as much as there are curtailment agreements, there's some unhappiness with some of the so-called supplies, but I think through our media correspondence, we'll source that information. Janine, I think just in terms of overall context, the report, we are busy putting together a strategic, tactical, and operational response, and we'll definitely, I think, through Eskom's media, and now with the new GCE taking on the reins, we'll communicate some of the issues. But I need to highlight that the VGB report has once again highlighted some important issues. As stated by the Minister, it's reaffirmed some of the issues we are addressing through the actual generation recovery plan. So I think I just wanted to give clarity. There are no issues on the Medupi and Kusile plant in terms of the water treatment plants that I'm aware of. In terms of the issue around the water supply, I think the question in terms of the FGD and Medupi, I need to give you assurance that the actual water supply plans, we are working with the Department of Water Affairs in terms of actually firming up those plans. There's no risk at this stage, and it also does cater for the installation of the FGD. In terms of, once again, the question repeated in terms of the inaccuracies, we'll put together as Eskom a holistic response, to actually highlight the issues. But more importantly, we're not being seen as defensive, but we just believe that some of the content which is put, we need to actually correct that. While I have the podium, I think the question in terms of the experts, I need to highlight that when one looks at the power stations and one looks at the major components, these are contracted to OEMs. So OEMs are actually charged with actually providing those subject matter experts. We have found in some pieces or some power stations where the contractor has not been providing quality service. In terms of Eskom's response to OEMs, we are getting back to establishing medium to long-term contracts with these OEMs, and I'm referring to your typical, we've always had OEMs for your turbines and for your boiler plant, but looking at some of the other auxiliary components like mills, for example. Then to complement that, as a result of the Energy Action Plan, we also have in Workstream 1 support from Business for SA. There are some industry experts that have been allocated to support Eskom, complement the skills. They are working at 5 stations, once again, reaffirming some of the issues that have been picked up with the key objective of trying to support Eskom but also improve the performance. And lastly, last year we communicated the full-time contracts that we put together for contractors, establishing anything between 1 year and 2 year contracts, just to sort of fill the stopgap for the critical and core skills where we've established contracts with individuals. A lot of them have been dispatched to, for example, to Tuka. So that's just to give you some sort of color on the issues around, how are we bringing back experts. Thank you.
On the FGDs, proposals going out for
I think that was a question from Chris Yellen. Chris, in terms of the FGD, I know there is a proposal out. I don't have the firm details, but I'm willing to actually share that through the media correspondence.
And Chris, I think Eskom did issue a media communication to indicate that on the curtailment side, I think that's immediately available. I think it's 3,400 megawatts. I think they've released a statement to indicate that. And to Naila, I did make the point that, and Eric did emphasize that point, is that there's been a step up in maintenance. So you'll see, we made the point that December, coming into January, we have taken out about 18,000 megawatts of available capacity. The last time we've seen such proportions of plant maintenance was about in 2020, and Eric was able to give an indication what does it average during the summer period, and of course we reach a peak of about 9,000 megawatts, and he made the point that during the cold periods, the winter, we're averaging about 2,500 or 3,000 megawatts. In relation to the winter plan Eskom will announce it closer to the date, as is normally the case. They do go out in public and share the scenarios so that the winter plan will be coming, and of course it takes into account what is the projected peak demand, and as a result of that, if you have this X percentage of generation capacity, then we are likely going to have the following intensity of load shedding. They make assumption on what will be, if you like, the average UCLF, and on the back of that, then they'll tell us the performance of the grid. So I will not preempt what Eskom will say. It's an independent process. I'm sure they are going to execute it, and they'll share that with the rest of the country. And like I said, once we have bedded down what these options are on the issues of transmission and the like, how we're going to financing it, having had a conversation with the NTCSA, they taking ownership of that process. I'm sure it's something that we'll be communicating in the media. The one thing I want to assure is that there's a degree of agency. I think we know on the generation side, part of the reason why we are where we are today is, if you like, not necessarily the absence of foresight, but some degree of prevarication in taking the necessary steps to ensure that you build up generation capacity to meet projected demand. So we're sitting with that problem now on the transmission side. We don't want to prolong that problem, and that's why it's important that we're able to go into the space more aggressively to ensure that we're able to finance transmission. on the back of the Eskom Transmission Development Plan. We know for the first 3 years Eskom has got allocation, but we want to have additional money so that we go over and above what Eskom can do in the first 3 years, so that we're able to onboard, if you like, in the most aggressive fashion, new generation capacity from renewable energy sources, especially in those Cape provinces where we've got limited or we've exhausted, if you like, grid capacity. But let me take the opportunity to thank everyone for attending the session. Wish you the best of the week ahead. Thank you.
Thank you very much to the Minister and the accompanying panel. We've come to the end of this media briefing. Thank you to you as well for attending. I wish you a good day further. Thanks.